FX Nation, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. As we are breaking down our four pairs, let's go ahead and talk about what setups have been available after we talked about the last video, where we are in the market and what we were looking for. So we were coming off on pound JPY, coming off peak formation high. So we would have been looking for sells. Now the crossover happened over here in this particular area. So what are the setups itself that would have been available essentially for us to trade? So let's take a look at those real quick and go over some of those specific setups. So going into Monday's session here, in the London session, you could see essentially we did have a trade setup, but what is the trade setup here? Essentially it would have been a type 3 setup. Now the setup itself would have been right here in these four candles. All right, these four candles here basically give you a kind of like a two doji star pattern essentially. Now a couple things that are not perfect on this pair or on this setup is the fact that I would have liked to see the 50 EMA a lot lower, you know, ideally touching the actual middle of the range. Obviously you can see here's a lot more higher, but that's perfectly fine. We still get a pattern pinning to the middle of the range. We're coming off peak formation high, so we're looking for sells anyways. So that would be the setup. Now the entry itself would be on this blue candle, essentially the pullback candle. Anywhere in here is a pretty decent entry. And then of course we're just going 2 to 1. This one here essentially ends up going about 3 to 1 risk reward on a type 3 in the London session. Now going over to the New York session, right out the gate we get a continuation trade. So continuation trades work the best whenever you already have some type of pattern or setup that happened during the London session. So in this case here, what we end up getting is you can see the pullback that starts mid London session back into the 50 EMA. The 50 EMA obviously acts as a form of resistance in this case. Now we don't actually get a pattern here to trade, but what we do get is a close below the 13 EMA. Now the important factors of this is the fact that look at the candle itself. Big bearish candle pretty much closes below all of the consolidation here that was in between the London and the New York session. And then most importantly, I think what makes this trade to me viable, very good, is the fact that we get a pullback. That pullback is almost half the candle. All right, so that allows you to get great risk to reward ratio on this trade. And again, if you could have gotten maxed out probably another 3 to 1 risk to reward ratio. But a simple 2 to 1 risk to reward ratio gets you right there, basically going right just back to the bottom of the range where the price has already been. So that's two setups in one day on pound JPY. Now here the very next day we get another type 3 setup. Here again, we explained in the last video, we get the movement that's coming out of the middle of the range. So immediately I'm already thinking that this is going to end up being a type 3 pattern because of this behavior. Now we have the 50 going through price. We get a star pattern here as well. And then again, the next candle gives us the pullback. That pullback is the entry. Now, because of the pullback, it allows us to get the entry. And honestly, you could put your stop loss up here. You're still only at about 19, 20 pip risk on this trade. If you put it anywhere lower than this, it makes it kind of hard, honestly, because this wick, all it's doing is basically grabbing the last of orders that were up here above the Asian range. In a situation like this, typically if you get the wick on this candle here, on this middle candle, that's the wick, you can put the stop loss on the next candle right above it. But in this case, we didn't have that option because the wick came from that specific candle that created that helped finish creating the star pattern. So in this case here, you would need to go all the way up to the top here just to protect the position for you. But again, it didn't matter because you end up getting over 3-to-1 risk reward ratio on this particular trade. Now you do get a very similar scenario here going into the New York session. Going into the New York session, you get very similar move, right? You're getting a major pullback here going into the US session, and now you're consolidating basically towards the middle of the range, and then also on the 50. Now, is there anything here that is actually tradable? Well, I mean, if you're looking at this right here, this pattern would not be considered a star pattern because this candle here does not cover 75% of the blue candle here. You could potentially enter on this red trade, on this red candle here if you like. That's the next one here. So again, you're having to do something like this, and then a 2-to-1, you wouldn't be able to get 2-to-1 is all the way down here. So if you would have taken this trade, it would have been a loss. Okay, so not the ideal trade. I think though, if you were going to take a trade, I think it would have been this one here, because this big candle here closes below the 13 EMA very aggressively, closes below all of these here. So if anything, I could have definitely seen, you know, traders going into this potential trade here. But again, if you weren't paying attention, you don't get 2-to-1 here. You get barely a 1-to-1 risk reward ratio, and then it comes back and it would have taken you out anyway. So you have two, you know, potential trades here that would have ended up in a loss for you. Okay, although you could see basically price action eventually goes in that direction. Okay, now what could you learn from this? Okay, because there's always something that you can learn from this. For me, the learning part about this is the fact that you see the behaviors of price when it gets to the middle. It keeps getting rejected, rejected, rejected. Why is it scared? It is almost like scared to go above the middle of the range. Okay, now when you see that kind of behavior, and then you see a third opportunity here closing again below the 13 EMA, could it have been another opportunity? Yes, you had a very decent pullback that you could have gotten into, and essentially you could have had something like this, and obviously that would have been a 4-to-1 risk reward ratio. Realistically though, you have to think about the fact that if you're a trader that took this trade here and you lost, and then you got in on the very next one again and you lost that one, you're very likely just to cut the loss and not get into another trade. But if you understand what you're looking at and what's happening here, okay, with the actual candles, and why is it keep rejecting off the middle of the range and then finally starts to move away, you could potentially take it for a third try. Again, anytime that you go back into a trade again, you want to make sure that you lower the risk, because that's pretty much the only thing that you can control. Everything else is essentially left to probabilities. All right, so if you were to enter this trade again for a third time, you know, you kind of want to basically want to use much smaller lot size, because again, you're risking for a third time, and you're trying to get into another trade setup on a continuation. Now looking at the very next day, obviously still again coming off that peak formation high, we're still looking for sells. There's no sell setups essentially in London session. There was a type 3 for buy, but again, that's just going against a bias if we're only looking for sells. So there would have been an opportunity for essentially a type 1 in the New York session, where you could see the first leg is created here, and then this is the second leg. You don't really get a pattern to trade, but you get a close of the 13 here on the second leg, and then essentially that could have been your entry there. So the entry would have been here, stop loss goes above this candle here, and then essentially, you know, you're getting almost a 3.5 to 1 risk to reward ratio on this particular trade. Again, I don't think a lot of traders maybe would have taken that trade, but that is a viable trade there. So those were the trades available on pound JPY. Now let's take a look at the trades available on pound USD. Again, we're coming off the peak formation here, so we are looking for essentially sell setups. So the question is, are there any good setups that have happened since the beginning of the week, since we took, from that peak formation high? So there haven't been any setups here on pound USD since the beginning of the week that met kind of all of our rules that we would actually take on this particular pair. Now, if we take a look at gold, we talked about gold, and we're just waiting essentially for peak formation low to confirm. We talked about price going after that 3100 mark, which it did. So we were obviously looking for buys on gold. So was there any essentially any potential setups for buys on gold? Well, the answer to that question is really no. There haven't been any buy opportunities on gold. Okay. I mean, looking at it right now, there could be a potential for a type 1 right here as we speak, with this being the first leg, this being the second leg, and then that would have been a potential entry there. So there have not been any good trade setups available for gold that would meet our trading criteria essentially. And then if we finally take a look at NAS100 coming off the reset, obviously we're looking for buys. So have there been any buy setups that we could have potentially taken? Well, I do believe that there were some opportunities here, but if we take a closer look at them, you can see what happens here. So here on Tuesday, okay, Tuesday, what looks to be a really good type 1 here with the first leg, second leg here, you can see ends up failing, and that would have been a loss here. Okay, there's nothing wrong with this trade setup. Okay, if you took this trade setup and you took it as a loss, that's okay. This is a good loss because looks like a really clean type 1. If you think about what's happening here, if you go back to that time frame right here, right, this looks like a really good type 1 pattern. All right. The only thing that it does not do, it even gives you, I mean, I think a 2-star doji here as well. You just don't really have that defined of apex here where you have 5 candles or more really in between the first and second leg. You kind of have the railroad track, and then immediately goes into the second leg. But I know a lot of traders would have definitely seen that as a type 1, and I don't blame them. That would have been, nothing wrong there if you took that trade and you took the loss. Going into the New York session here, honestly, there would have been a trade set up here if this would have been a good railroad track, but it's not. So it kind of leads to this right here. It's just way too much to take as a trade setup here. Even if you see this as a star pattern, which I think it is, the next candle obviously goes all the way further lower. So again, just not the ideal setup. And as you can see, for the rest of the week, there hasn't been anything that's been really good or viable, honestly, as a trade setup on this pair. So pretty much all of the trades were on pound JPY. That's how it happens. Sometimes you can't possibly get trade setups every day, and that's perfectly fine. But that's the reality of trading, honestly. Some days you're going to have multiple setups like you saw on pound JPY. On other pairs, you may not get any setups, and you might not get any setups for a week or whatever the case may be. The point here is that you have to be patient in waiting for the trade setups that you want. Okay, don't get suckered into taking a trade setup that honestly just doesn't look good. I mean, the only trade setup here that would have been good, that I would have taken also, was this type 1 here that would have lost, and that's okay. Okay, because you have a bunch of trades on pound JPY that were wins. So, but that is a breakdown of the 4 pairs that we're following. As of right now, obviously, just a quick update. We're still looking for buys on NAS100. Gold, we're still looking for buys. We're still coming off that peak formation low. Yes, it's retracing. That's perfectly normal. I mean, you could do a fib retracement here, and this could end up possibly being a good scenario for a possible swing trade if it comes down to the 50, which it kind of did already, or 618. So that could be an option there as well for people who swing trade. But we're still looking for buys on gold, and still looking really for all-time highs to be broken on that one. Pound USD, I mean, technically still looking for sells, obviously, because we're still coming off that peak formation high, but it's consolidating. You can see that clearly. It's consolidating. So whenever I see a pair doing this, consolidating, like, it's just not a pair that I want to trade, honestly. So I just worry about looking at other pairs that have a clear sense of direction. And of course, pound JPY still coming off that peak formation high, technically still looking for sells. I know we had a pretty decent retracement now going into 618, so we'll have to watch that and see if that goes any higher. If it does go any higher, this may end up leading to a reset, which then would lead next target is probably going to be all the way up at 196 or so, give or take. That is our video for today. Kind of broke down all the different setups that were possible, some losses, some wins, and just some were not even trades. Guys, if you need help with peak formations and things of that nature, make sure join FXN levels. I basically do them for you. I show you every single pair, 47 pairs every single day before the London session, so you can have a clear directional bias, so that way you don't have to worry about calculating this or doing it yourself. I'll do it for you. Links are in the description. As always, join our Trading with a Purpose Discord, also in the description. We'll see you in the next video, guys.